Hi, and welcome to the Impact of Social Media podcast with me, Rich Brown, where we discuss the impact social media is having on the world around us. Please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, and if you need any help getting better results with your social media, please get in touch. You can follow me on social media at rich@qbd, or you can email me at rich.brown@quickbydesign.co.uk. Social media can be very effective when you're trying to share vital information to a lot of people very, very quickly. But what is it like to have to use social media in that way at an important time? So today I'm speaking with Dave Throop. Hi, Dave.
Good morning, Rick.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I will say now you're my first remote podcast. I usually record these face-to-face, but given the lockdown, so you're my first one doing like this. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and share your thoughts on this. Would you just like to introduce yourself, the role that you have within the environmental agency?
Yeah, my name's Dave Throop, and I am the area manager for Herefordshire and Worcestershire for the Environment Agency. That means really I'm responsible for anything that the agency does within the two counties. So, we've got a pretty varied remit. We deal with flooding, which most people know us for, but we also regulate big businesses as well, big power stations, that kind of stuff. We deal with pollutions. We monitor the environment as well in terms of taking water, air samples, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very wide brief, but a very, very interesting one.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah, and obviously you have these kind of peaks of very, very busyness, but yeah, busy all the time as well. So can you just take us back to the floods in that kind of end of January, February time, and just kind of remind us again, because the weather's been quite good recently, isn't it? So it's quite hard to remember what it was like, but just how serious it was at the time. Can you just maybe paint a picture of what it was like?
Yeah, well, I've got a few years in now with the agency and dealing with environmental incidents and that kind of stuff. And what we saw in February was the word unprecedented is overused, but I've certainly never experienced anything like it. And that's backed up with some of the figures that we were seeing. So we were seeing river levels that have never been seen before on rivers that have been monitored for hundreds of years. We saw rainfall levels that haven't been seen before, measured by the Met Office for over a century. So what we were seeing was very, very extreme. And another complicating factor was it was so widespread as well. So if you think of some of the other big floods that we've had, they tended to be concentrated in one relatively small area. This was huge and right up the length of the River Severn and the River Wye. So we got hundreds of miles of rivers affected, dozens of communities that were affected, and flood levels like we'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And it was quite an emotional time, really. I'm Worcestershire born and bred as well, so it's on my own manor. I thought I knew the way that our rivers worked, but what was happening in February was truly remarkable. And at the end of the day, well over 1,000, probably 1,500 people and businesses were really badly flooded at the time. And these poor people, a lot of them are still out of their houses now or living with building works, trying to get builders in the middle of a coronavirus outbreak. So,
it's relentless, isn't it? I've said that certainly some of those businesses. I mean, I live in Worcester, and those businesses that are around the kind of county ground area over the bridge there, that they just kind of got over the floods, and then the coronavirus hits. So it's incredibly difficult times. The thing that struck me as well, and we obviously will get into how you use social media through the time, was I was following your feeds during it, and it was almost the speed that it was happening, that it was such a moving thing so quickly. Was that one of the things that you found?
It was, and I mean, we are used to dealing with flooding. Don't get me wrong, and we've got very sophisticated systems that deal with this. So we've come a very long way with managing flooding from the big floods that we saw in the early 2000s. So we've got quite sophisticated weather forecasting now, and the what if scenarios. We've got modelling that shows what the rivers are likely to do. But in this case, the speed of rise of some of the bigger rivers really was remarkable. world. We haven't seen that bit before. The models weren't coping as well as they normally do. And I say it was so widespread over such a large an area, and what we got were successive belts of rainfall. I think we had 2 or 3 named storms within 3 or 4 weeks in February, and they just kept topping the levels up and up. And when you were in the midst of it, it just seemed like no end to it. It was one thing unfolding after another. Really.
Yes. Yeah, and it's those kind of speed aspects as well that I think that I was interested to get your thoughts on. We're obviously going to talk about the impact kind of social media has in your ability to share that vital information during the floods, but to kind of narrow it down a bit in terms of the social media channels you use, which ones do you use? Do you have a preferred one which you find is best for these types of things?
Yeah, I do. I'm exclusively a tweeter, really.
Yeah.
I think to be honest, I don't really get on particularly well with the other media, and I think it just makes it more complicated if you try. I'm a Facebook lurker, sort of privately. I don't use it for business at all. I use it slightly for socially, but I don't particularly like the format. I've got an Instagram account, a work one, but to be frank, I can't see the point of it, because all you do is posting pretty pictures,
take nice photos.
Or whatever. I can't get my head around how it works. So Twitter, it just seems a great medium to me, because you can share stuff in real time, and the challenge that I like is you've got to be concise. You used to have to be very, very concise with 180 characters.
Yeah.
You've still got to be quite concise. So telling that story in a very few characters with the aid of up to 4 pictures, maybe a bit of video and a chart. Yeah. I just find it fascinating. I enjoy it, and I use it slightly wider for work. I've obviously got the work account, but anybody that follows my account will know that I'll do moths, I'll do where I've been on my bike a bit, I'll do quite a lot about the weather, that type of stuff. Because I think it just broadens out the interest, if you like. So it's not all. I don't think you can use social media just as the mechanism to communicate with people in times of crisis and then leave it completely alone. You've got to have that longer term presence, and that's certainly how I use it. But to answer your question, I'm exclusively Twitter.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about it. So with the training courses that I run, often Twitter is the one which is a bit more like a news feed. It is more immediate. It's the one you would naturally go to get that immediate kind of information about something that's happening, because the other social media channels are kind of work in slightly different ways. So in terms of kind of how you use it at the time, can you just take us through a kind of, I use it a normal day, but you kind of know what I mean, a day in kind of height of floods, how you would then use Twitter to the types of information that you were showing. You mentioned about videos and charts and things. How were you using it to kind of get that message across?
It depends what role I'm doing, because everybody in the Environment Agency has incident roles as well as their normal day job, if you like. And my principal roles are media, so I do a lot of TV and radio, and I'm the media spokesperson. And that is a very useful role for social media, because if you're doing the media spokesperson, with the exception now with coronavirus, when you can't get out very much, you are where the incident is. So if there are pictures to be taken, if there's films to be done, you are usually at the centre of it. I say that was complicated slightly in February because it was so widespread. But fortunately, I've been doing this for 7, 8 years now, and a lot of my colleagues in the agency, know what I do. Whether they like what I do or not, I don't know, but they know what I do. So I tend to get pictures and videos sent me from all over the place. So if we've got people out in Shrewsbury and I'm in Worcester or Hereford, then I tend to get quite a lot of pictures and videos
that's interesting
as well. Yeah. So I can, a lot of people think, God, you get about a lot, don't you? But whereas in fact, a lot of this stuff is obviously sent to me in the times of flooding or crisis, and that works really well. And I think quite a lot of our people have got into it now, and they quite like seeing their pictures, on social media, and then it's picked up by the regional media, TV, all that sort of stuff. So it's a very engaging media, if you like. So people can pick it up very quickly. But in terms of how I do it. part of it, I think, is understanding what's going on. For me, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be credible. You've got to know what you're talking about. So, if I'm on the spot, I do know the way our rivers work. I do know the locations. I do know what's likely to happen because I'm privy to, obviously, to what's going on in the incident room and all that kind of stuff. So, I think I can get to good locations quite easily because of the role I'm doing. And I've also obviously got the information and the knowledge that you can do to communicate that. So, it's a question of stitching all that together, really.
Yeah. And then in terms of when you can kind of see the weather change and you kind of know it's happening, or it's we're in the middle of it and having to deal with it all, when then you as the individual and the organization as a whole are going through the plans of how do we get the messages out there to the local people to let them know what's going on and stay away from these areas or be prepared for it, how high up on the kind of agenda of discussions is social media? How important is it within the kind of like the communications PR aspect of sharing this information?
Extremely important now. I think we're relatively late adopters. I think most of the public sector, to be honest, are fairly late adopters. But now it is one of the principal things that we do think about. And in addition, we've got a number of what we call official tweeters like me. So my handle's Dave through EA, Environment Agency. But we've also got a number of corporate accounts. So there's an Environment Agency Midlands account as well.
Yeah.
So we try to stitch those together. We have a duty. We've got a statutory duty to warn and inform people. So this really is important stuff. We're what they call a Category 1 responder, which puts us on the same basis as police and fire and rescue and ambulance service. Yeah. So this is core stuff to us, and it's really important to make it happen. But I think what we see a lot more now is coordination of message as well. So the other role that I do a lot of is what we call multi-agency. So it's working together with all the other emergency services, with local authorities, and increasingly those messages that are going to be communicated through social media are discussed at these multi-agency meetings as well. So we've all got a shared understanding of what the key messages are. Is it public safety in Tenbury? Is it about stay away from the water because it's likely to be polluted? So we discuss these things in the round, and then we will use our collective social media channels to promote it. So there's much more joining up than there was a few years ago.
Yeah.
If you think back to the big floods of 2007, which just predates social media. It was so different in those days, in order to try and get your message across, you used to have to use the existing channels, so local radio, local papers, local media, and it was so much more clunky and cumbersome than it is now, where you have the message, you control the message, you put the message out as you want it to, and then it will be picked up far quicker than making telephone calls.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll come on to the kind of what it was like beforehand, but something you just mentioned then I think is interesting is, like you said, it's this is kind of coordinated approach. When you're sharing those things, then do you notice, is there, like you on Twitter, do you get more reach with these messages and feel that more people are seeing it and engaging with it compared to like I want to use the word business one, but you know what I mean, like the kind of more official Twitter accounts? Do you see a difference?
Yeah, it's massive difference. I don't know the proper stats. I have a look every now and again on my Twitter analytics or whatever it is. But the what do they call the total number of hits? What's it called?
It'd be impressions or reach.
Impressions. Yeah. Well, my usual impressions are somewhere around about 1 million a month, something like that, which is quite so it's still good.
Yeah.
But up in the floods of February, I think it was 6, 7, 8 million, something like that. So it's that kind of quanta difference, and without doubt the message gets out. If we want to get something out there, by far the best way is on social media. If I tweet there's a severe flood warning in Tenbury with a couple of pictures and to heed the emergency services, that kind of stuff, I can bet my bottom dollar my phone will light up within 30 seconds and it'll be the local media, that kind of stuff, wanting to promote those messages. So it's hugely effective.
In terms of hashtags, do you use that to kind of localize some of the things, or how would you use some of those things?
Yes, in an incident, in a biggish incident, then we will do, and some of those, sometimes it will be agreed with multi-agency approval. So in a really big incident, like we saw the February floods, there will be what we call a multi-agency communications cell. So that will have representatives from all the emergency services, and they will discuss both the best channels and the best hashtag and the best way of getting stuff out, and what we need to be focusing on. In smaller events, it will be left up to probably me and my media colleagues at head office and locally to decide, what the best way, the best messages are. But yes, do use hashtags.
So one of the other things, like I mentioned, is that, so kind of going back to that and I think the 2007 is a good one to pick on, actually, because it is slightly before social media. So the social media giants, they kind of were around, but they were only just starting to find their feet, really. And I always find it interesting because it's not that long ago, and here are these platforms, and it's kind of one of the things that inspired this whole podcast series was, these things haven't necessarily been around for that long, and just look at how much we use them, rely on them, how much things have changed. So could you just take us in a bit more into what that was like? I know you said it was a kind of a bit harder and slower to get those messages out there, but the types of things you would have to do, kind of 2007 and before, with any floods, getting the message out there.
Yeah, it was hugely different, and I think one of the worries now is how we would manage to deal with a really enormous flood with the numbers of properties that we had flooded. Because although the floods of last spring were big because of all the flood defences, or largely because of all the flood defences we built, there were a lot less people who were directly affected. As I said, unfortunately, about 1,500 were flooded. Back in 2007, we were talking 15,000 were flooded just in Worcestershire and Gloucestershire. So something of that level of magnitude, people didn't have any water for 3 weeks at the time as well, because a lot of the infrastructure was knocked out. Again, it's more protected now since then because of the lessons we've learned. But if you imagine that scale of event now with social media, how you would manage during that kind of influx is very, very difficult. I think you would just have to focus on getting the message out there. Responding to social media in times of enormous crisis like that would be virtually impossible. But to answer your question, in that time, it was all done via kind of set piece broadcast interviews with particular local radio in those days was one of the keys that we used. But there was a lot more. Structure to it, if you like, in those days, in that our media people would craft the message and give you the line to take and all that kind of stuff, and it would then be set up for a media interview, this, that, and the other, which made it very clunky in real time, because these things, they, as you know, they unfold extremely quickly.
Yeah.
So being able to use social media and have trusted people on the ground to be able to put the messages out as they happen, it's just a completely different way of dealing with it, a very different feel to how stuff is handled.
Can you remember then the kind of when you kind of really first embracing Twitter, like the first times you went live with one of the videos or something? Can you remember the kind of time when it started to come in? Did it feel a bit awkward and peculiar to start with, and like how it is now, and you're probably a lot more comfortable using it? Can you remember those early days when you're adopting it?
I do. I don't remember the actual year. I think it's 7 or 8 years now, so that must make it about 2012, 2011, something like that. And it was when the agency very first dipped its toe in the water to social media, and they were looking for people who would be the first EA tweeters. And I somewhat reluctantly stuck my hand up, because I'd never done social media before, but at the time I was media spokesperson, so I was used to the kind of formal media, but I've never done any sort of social media. So I thought, well, I almost felt obliged to give it a go. And originally it was extremely clunky, and there were so many people. I think there were more people watching me than there were following me. So within the agency, they were so nervous because they were so used to being able to control the channels of communication, and suddenly they got these potential mavericks wandering off around the country. I think there were 10 of us or something to start with, and everything you tweeted. I remember originally for the first couple of months, I think we were called probationary tweeters or something, and everything we did had to go to the centre. Yeah, had to go to the centre for approval before we sent it in our names. So there was this real nervousness around it, and I found the first bit so clunky. I thought, well, this is a bit daft. But I remember what hooked me into it, and it was the kind of thrill of getting people following you. So when you don't really want the police following you, do you? When West Mercia police followed me, I thought, this is quite good, isn't it? The local MP or that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, well, this could be quite influential if all these folks are looking at this. And then it just sort of went from there. And I said that the thing that fires me with it is the challenge of being able to communicate very succinctly. So we deal with really interesting stuff as well, and it's my personal interest as well. So the environment is I'm personally interested in. So you put those two together, and it becomes a real challenge. I remember I didn't do video for quite a long time. It was very hard to do video to start with. It was hard enough to do pictures because I had to do it when we started from a BlackBerry, and the BlackBerry app, the Twitter app, was awful. And actually a photo was
the signal in some of the areas of the county might have been against you.
There was no signal. And then Periscope came along, I think, didn't it? And I started tinkering with that. You could never get signal, and it was all a bit clunky. But the more it's become integrated into the single app, and the better that the technology has come now. So I've got a big iPhone and a big iPad. It just makes it so much easier. Network connection now is much better. You can usually do a reasonable stream live. So all that has just made it easier and easier. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you are. I think I looked the other day. I think I've tweeted something like 35,000 tweets since I've started. So I'm pretty prolific. And the more you do, I guess, just the more comfortable you get.
Yeah, it was one of the other things I was going to come on to is around your kind of social media profile and presence. And so with that, were there times when you kind of hit those milestones of X amount of followers when you thought, wow, this is starting to become a thing now. Like I know people were seeing it and watching it, but I'm starting to be recognised. And the other thing as well was just picking up on the thing you mentioned earlier about people started sending you content. And in the kind of marketing terms, it's often referred to as like user-generated content. So like hotels or restaurants might share what people have posted about their hotel or restaurant because they've said nice things. And I'm wondering then at what point did you feel like you became the go-to, like, this is the man, I'm going to follow Dave because he knows kind of what he's going to about. And if I've got a photo or a little video to send, I send it to him, or the local press come to you. Was there a few questions in one there, but that kind of evolution of your own Twitter followers and then how people started sending you content?
Well, I think it's incremental, isn't it? And I guess that's what keeps you keen, because I remember getting 100 followers, and I thought, well, this is absolutely fantastic, isn't it? There's 100 people looking at everything I do, and then you look at some of the analytics, it's even bigger than that. So then I got 1,000. I thought, this is incredible. And then every kind of milestone gets more and more. But I think what brings it home is the reaction you get to it. So it is a powerful tool. So not only the responses that you get from people back, but the ways your stuff is picked up, particularly by mainstream media as well. So you do start to think that this is becoming more influential. And then in events, in incidents and that, you do get quite a lot of positive feedback, which is great, because at the end of the day, you're not doing this for a personal kick, really.
Yeah.
I am an environment agency tweeter, so I'm doing it on behalf of the agency. So when you get feedback saying, yes, I'm finding this stuff really useful, really interesting, thank you, that really keeps you going. You think, this is great stuff. And I guess the stuff in terms of people sending me things, it's because they also follow me. They see that it is relatively influential, that people are picking up on it. A lot of our people are very technical, very specialist people. So we've got people who know everything there is to know about fish, people who know everything there is to know about water quality, all that kind of stuff. So if they are very passionate about their subject. If they can see a way of getting their subject more airtime, more exposure, more stuff, then they like to see that kind of
and
thing.
That must help you as well gather a kind of broader understanding of the things that are happening. That must really help with your position then as the kind of man at the front of us all.
Hugely, I know very little about a lot, and whereas our technical people, they know loads of stuff. I'm a complete ignoramus with most subjects. I've got a very peripheral view of it because of the breadth of stuff we do in my role. You can only skim over the top of this stuff. So to have people around you that do know this stuff, absolute chapter and verse, is really good. So if it is about a fish population on a certain river, I wouldn't have a clue, but I know somebody who does. Or if it's about the flood history of a certain location, I don't know, but I know 3 people that do. So being able to call on that, I think is quite good. And by and large, people are very supportive, because I say it's getting their message, their specialism out there into the main.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. How you can how you have that kind of coordinated collective thing where you can provide this different information. Thank you so much. It's been so interesting, kind of hearing a bit more behind the scenes about how you go about doing these things. I just have one more question, and it is actually a non kind of social media question, because it's something I'm just genuinely interested in. Is your the kind of forecasts going forward? Do you think the February floods we'll see them? Do you think we'll see them again? The weather we've had recently, these kind of extremes, are you kind of prepping yourself to do more of that twittering when these things come around again?
In a word, yes. And the extremes that we're seeing now, this is off the path. You've heard it probably 10 times before. You can never ascribe one weather event to climate change, but the world is warming. That is unequivocal. There's no doubt about it. And in a warmer world, we expect to see more unstable weather, more events exactly like we've seen. So absolutely yes, and we are gearing up for it. Climate change is our main focus, and as what we call ourselves, the blue light for the environment. This is our future. This is what the future looks like, and probably more extreme than we're seeing now. So we need to be ready for that.
Yeah. No, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking time. I know you're a very busy man, so I really do appreciate you coming on the podcast. So thanks for sharing your stories.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. I hope you found it interesting. Please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, and if you need any help getting better results with your social media, please get in touch. You can follow me on social media at rich@qbd, or you can email me at rich.brown@quickbydesign.co.uk.